The first time I saw the for sale sign standing in my mother's field, I nearly drove my truck into a ditch. I slammed on the brakes. Dust exploded around me. And for several seconds, I just stared. The sign stood near the old oak tree my mother had planted when I was 10 years old. The same tree where she used to sit with a glass of sweet tea after long days in the fields. The same tree where she made me a promise. And where I made one to her. This farm will always be yours one day, Hannah. I could still hear her voice. Even though she'd been gone for 3 years. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. The farm wasn't supposed to be for sale. Not now. Not ever. I jumped out of the truck and stormed across the property. Workers were measuring sections of land. A photographer was taking pictures. And standing in the middle of it all was my stepmother, Denise. She wore sunglasses and a bright smile. Like she had already won. The moment she saw me, her smile faded. Hannah. What is this? I pointed directly at the sign. Denise sighed dramatically. I was going to tell you. My stomach turned. No good sentence had ever started with those words. Tell me what? She crossed her arms. The farm is being sold. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard her. What? The farm. She spoke slowly, as if I were a child. I'm selling it. The world seemed to stop. Every memory I had came rushing back. My mother teaching me to ride horses. Summer mornings collecting eggs. Harvest festivals. Family dinners in the old farmhouse. Everything. This wasn't just land. This was my family's history. You can't sell it. Denise laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh. Actually, I can. The confidence in her voice shook me. After my mother died from cancer, my father inherited management of the property. 2 years later, he married Denise. Then 6 months ago, Dad died unexpectedly from a heart attack. Since then, Denise had acted like she owned everything. She sold Dad's truck, closed several farm accounts, even fired workers who had been with our family for decades. Now she was trying to sell the farm itself. I want you off this property. Her words snapped me back to reality. I stared at her. What? You heard me. This is my mother's farm. It was. The smile returned. But things change. I felt physically sick. Because for the first time, I realized Denise wasn't bluffing. She had buyers. She had paperwork. She had confidence. The kind of confidence people have when they believe the law is on their side. That night I barely slept. Around midnight, I climbed into the attic of the farmhouse. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Old records. Documents. Anything. Hours passed. Dust covered my clothes. Then I found a small wooden box hidden behind several storage bins. The box belonged to my mother. I recognized it immediately. Inside were photographs, letters, tax records, and one sealed envelope. Across the front, in my mother's handwriting, were 6 words that made my heart stop. Open only if the farm is threatened. My hands started shaking. Because somehow, years before she died, my mother knew this day might come. And what I discovered inside that envelope would send me straight to the county records office, where a single document would stop Denise's sale cold. My hands trembled as I held the envelope. For several moments, I just stared at it. The handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's. Neat. Careful. Familiar. Seeing it again after 3 years felt like opening a door to the past. I slowly broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter and a folded legal document. The letter came first. I unfolded it carefully, and the moment I saw the first line, tears filled my eyes. My dearest Hannah, if you're reading this, someone is trying to take the farm away from our family. My breath caught. Mom knew. Somehow, years before she died, she had seen this possibility coming. I kept reading. This farm has been in our family for nearly 80 years. It survived droughts, floods, recessions, and hardship. I wasn't going to let it disappear because of one bad decision or one dishonest person. My heart pounded. Then came the part that changed everything. Several years ago, I filed documents with the county to protect the farm. The records are public, but most people never think to look for them. If anyone ever tries to sell the property, take the enclosed document to the county clerk immediately. I stared at the paper attached behind the letter. It looked official. Stamped. Signed. Recorded. But I didn't fully understand it. All I knew was that my mother believed it mattered. And I trusted my mother. The next morning, I drove straight to the county records office. The building sat on the edge of town. A plain brick structure most people ignored. I walked inside carrying the envelope like it contained treasure. Because maybe it did. An elderly clerk named Mr. Dawson listened patiently as I explained everything. My mother's death. My father's remarriage. Denise's attempt to sell the farm. The letter. When I finished, he adjusted his glasses. Then examined the document. His eyebrows immediately rose. Well. My heart jumped. What? He looked at me. Your mother was a very smart woman. I felt hope for the first time in days. What does this mean? Mr. Dawson disappeared into the records archive. 20 minutes later, he returned carrying a thick folder. He spread several documents across the counter, then pointed to one specific filing. Here. I leaned closer. My stomach tightened. The document contained my mother's signature. It had been filed nearly 7 years before her death. Long before Denise entered our lives. Long before my father became sick. Long before any of this began. What am I looking at? Mr. Dawson smiled slightly. A conservation trust. I frowned. I don't understand. He tapped the page. Your mother transferred ownership rights under very specific conditions. My pulse quickened. What conditions? He pointed to a paragraph. I read it once. Then twice. Then a third time. Because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The farm could not be sold without approval from the designated beneficiary. My heart nearly stopped. I looked at the next page. Then the next. And there it was. The designated beneficiary. My name. Mine. Not my father's. Not Denise's. Mine. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Mom had protected the farm. Legally. Years ago. Mr. Dawson nodded. If these records are valid, and they appear to be, any sale would require your authorization. A laugh escaped me. Not because anything was funny. Because the relief was overwhelming. Denise had spent weeks acting like she owned everything. But according to county records, she couldn't sell a single acre without me. Then Mr. Dawson turned another page. His expression suddenly changed. The moment I hung up the phone, I knew one thing. Denise was scared. For weeks, she had acted confident, arrogant, even. Like the farm was already sold. Like there was nothing I could do to stop her. But people only issue warnings when they feel threatened. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I was the threat. The next morning, Attorney Rebecca Collins agreed to review the documents I had collected from the county records office. Her office overlooked the town square. The walls were lined with law books and framed certificates. Within minutes of examining the paperwork, her expression changed. Then she read everything again. Slowly. Carefully. Finally, she leaned back in her chair. Hannah. My heart raced. What? She tapped the trust agreement. Your mother was brilliant. A small smile appeared on my face. Why? Because she anticipated exactly this kind of situation. I felt a lump form in my throat. Even after death, Mom was still protecting me. Rebecca pointed to several clauses. The farm isn't owned in the traditional sense. I listened carefully. The land is protected through the trust. And Denise doesn't have authority to sell it. Relief washed over me. But Rebecca wasn't finished. However, my stomach immediately tightened. There was always a however. What now? She slid the loan agreement toward me. This concerns me. The debt. She nodded. Very much. Rebecca opened another file. Then another. And another. The deeper she dug, the worse things became. Within an hour, she had uncovered something shocking. Denise wasn't drowning under one loan. She had taken out multiple loans. Several. Against different assets. Different lenders. Different financial institutions. And somehow, every road led back to the farm. I stared at the paperwork. Why would she do that? Rebecca's answer came quietly. Because she needed money desperately. My stomach dropped. How much money? She totaled the figures. Then looked at me. The amount made my blood run cold. Nearly $1 million. I couldn't breathe. 1 million. Gone. Borrowed. Spent. Somehow. Somewhere. And Denise had apparently believed selling the farm would solve everything. But then Rebecca uncovered the most disturbing document of all. A property disclosure form. Signed 3 months earlier. I looked down. Then froze. The form claimed Denise had clear authority to transfer ownership of the farm. That wasn't true. The county records proved it. The trust proved it. Everything proved it. Yet she had signed anyway. Rebecca looked directly at me. Either she never checked ownership records. She paused. Or she knowingly ignored them. Neither answer was good. 3 days later, the sale meeting took place. The buyers arrived. The real estate company arrived. Surveyors. Inspectors. Attorneys. Everyone. The atmosphere felt tense from the beginning. I sat beside Rebecca at the conference table. Across from us sat Denise. She looked confident. But I noticed something new. Her hands were shaking. Just slightly. The lead buyer opened the meeting. We're prepared to finalize the purchase. Rebecca calmly stood. Before that happens, there are several issues that need to be addressed. The room immediately became quiet. Denise's face tightened. The buyer frowned. What issues? Rebecca placed copies of the county records on the table. One by one. Trust documents. Ownership filings. Recorded restrictions. Legal protections. Every piece of evidence my mother had left behind. The buyers began reading. Then rereading. Then exchanging nervous looks. The room grew silent. Very silent. Finally, one attorney spoke. This property cannot legally be transferred. The words landed like thunder. I watched the color drain from Denise's face. No. Her voice sounded weak. There must be some mistake. There isn't. The attorney pointed directly at the trust. The designated beneficiary has not approved this sale. I felt tears forming in my eyes. Because at that exact moment, my mother's plan worked. Years after her death, her voice was still protecting the farm. The lead buyer slowly closed his folder. Then looked directly at Denise. You represented that you had authority to sell this property. Nobody spoke. You accepted deposits. Still silence. You signed legal disclosures. The room felt frozen. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of the lender representatives stood up. Apparently they had attended expecting payment from the sale proceeds. Instead, they had just learned the sale couldn't happen. The man looked furious. Then he asked a simple question. If you cannot legally sell the property. He stared directly at Denise. Why did you tell us you could? Denise's face turned completely white. For several seconds she couldn't answer. Not because she didn't have words. Because there weren't any. The truth had finally caught her. And it had happened in the worst possible place. A room full of attorneys. A room full of lenders. A room full of witnesses. Then one of the buyers pushed back his chair and stood. We're withdrawing immediately. Another followed. Then another. Within minutes, the deal was dead. Completely dead. The farm wasn't being sold. Not today. Not next week. Not ever. At least not without my approval. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt something else. Sadness. Because this never had to happen. But Denise wasn't finished. As everyone prepared to leave, she suddenly stood. Tears filled her eyes. And for the first time since my father died, I saw genuine panic. Because she knew something the rest of us didn't. Something about the missing money. Something about the debt. Something about where nearly $1 million had gone. And moments later, a federal investigator walked through the conference room door asking for her by name. The room went silent the moment the investigator walked in. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Denise froze. The investigator was a tall man in a dark suit carrying a leather folder. He looked directly at Denise. "Ms. Carter." Denise swallowed hard. "Yes. We need to speak with you." I had never seen fear appear on someone's face so quickly. The confident woman who had spent months ordering people around was suddenly gone. In her place stood someone terrified. The investigator opened his folder. "We have questions regarding several financial transactions." My stomach tightened. The lenders exchanged glances. The attorneys stopped gathering their papers. Everyone was listening. Denise attempted a smile. "There must be some misunderstanding." The investigator didn't smile back. "We hope so." Hope so. Not believe so. Hope so. That tiny difference made my skin crawl. Within minutes, Denise left the room with the investigator. The meeting ended. The buyers were gone. The sale was dead. And yet I couldn't stop thinking about one question. Where had all the money gone? Nearly $1 million didn't simply disappear. There had to be an answer. 3 days later, I got one. Attorney Rebecca called. "Hannah, you need to come to my office." Immediately. Her tone told me everything. Something important had happened. I drove there as fast as I could. When I arrived, several folders were spread across her desk. Financial records, bank statements, property filings, investigation notices. Rebecca pointed to a chair. "Sit down." My heart started racing. What happened? She took a deep breath. Denise wasn't spending the money on herself. That wasn't the answer I expected. "What do you mean?" Rebecca handed me several documents. The name on every page was the same. Jason Carter. I frowned. "My stepbrother." Rebecca nodded. I felt dizzy. Jason. Denise's son from her first marriage. A man I hadn't seen in years. A man who constantly jumped from one business scheme to another. A man who never seemed able to keep a job. What does he have to do with this? Rebecca slid more documents toward me. Failed investments. Business losses. Personal debts. Luxury purchases. Unpaid taxes. Lawsuits. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. Jason wasn't simply broke. He was financially destroyed. And Denise had been trying to rescue him. Again. And again. And again. Using borrowed money. Using loans. Using anything she could access. Including my family's farm. My stomach turned. All of this. Every lie. Every betrayal. Every attempt to sell the property. It wasn't because she loved the farm. It wasn't because she hated me. It wasn't even entirely about greed. She was trying to save her son. No matter who got hurt. No matter what she destroyed. A week later, I returned to the farmhouse. For the first time in months, the property felt peaceful. The survey stakes were gone. The buyers were gone. The sale signs were gone. The farm was safe. At least for now. That evening, I sat alone in my mother's old bedroom. The room looked exactly the way she left it. Her books remained on the shelves. Her favorite lamp sat beside the bed. Even her reading glasses remained in the top drawer. As I opened the drawer, something caught my attention. A small envelope. Yellowed with age. Hidden beneath several old photographs. My hands froze. I had searched this room before. How had I missed it? The envelope had my name written across the front. Only one word. Hannah. I carefully opened it. Inside was a second letter from my mother. A letter nobody knew existed. Not my father. Not Denise. Nobody. The paper trembled in my hands as I began reading. My sweet girl. If you found this letter, then things have probably become difficult. There's something I've never told you. Something I've kept secret for many years. My heart immediately started pounding. I continued reading. And with every sentence, my world shifted. The secret wasn't about the farm. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about Denise. It was about my grandfather. The man who built Willow Creek Farm. The man everyone in town respected. The man I thought I knew. According to my mother's letter, he had hidden something decades ago. Something valuable. Something that legally belonged to our family. Something nobody had ever claimed. I stared at the page in disbelief. Because if my mother was telling the truth, there was an undiscovered asset connected to the farm. An asset worth far more than the land itself. I read the letter twice. Then 3 times. Certain I had misunderstood. But the words never changed. At the bottom of the page, my mother had written one final instruction. Check the old county archives. Look under your grandfather's original property filings. My pulse quickened. County archives. Again. It all came back to the county records. The same records that had stopped Denise's sale. The same records that had protected the farm. And now, the same records that might reveal a secret hidden for nearly 50 years. A secret my grandfather took to his grave. A secret my mother protected until her last breath. And the next morning, I was heading back to the courthouse to uncover the truth. I barely slept that night. My mother's letter sat on my bedside table. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept rereading her final words. Check the old county archives. By sunrise, I was already driving toward the courthouse. The same courthouse that had helped save the farm. The same courthouse where my mother had quietly built legal protections years before anyone knew they would be needed. If there was another secret hidden there, I intended to find it. Mr. Dawson was already at the records office when I arrived. When he saw me walk in carrying my mother's letter, he immediately knew something was wrong. Back again. I managed a small smile. I think my mother left me another puzzle. He laughed. She always was the smartest person in this county. I couldn't argue with that. An hour later, we were surrounded by decades-old property records. Boxes. Maps. Survey reports. Tax filings. Handwritten deeds dating back generations. The deeper we searched, the more confused I became. Nothing looked unusual. Nothing looked valuable. Nothing explained the mystery in Mom's letter. Then Mr. Dawson stopped. His eyes narrowed. That's odd. My heart skipped. What? He pulled out a yellowed document. The paper was nearly 50 years old. Filed under my grandfather's name. I immediately recognized his signature. What is it? Mr. Dawson adjusted his glasses. Then looked at me. Hannah. His voice sounded surprised. Your grandfather never sold the mineral rights. I frowned. The what? The mineral rights. I stared blankly. I had heard the term before but never paid attention. Mr. Dawson quickly explained. When land is sold or inherited, ownership of what's beneath the land can sometimes remain separate. Oil, gas, minerals, natural resources. Many families sold those rights decades ago. Apparently mine never had. My pulse quickened. Is that important? He gave a slow nod. Very. The room suddenly felt smaller. We continued digging through records. And what we discovered next left me speechless. Several companies had made inquiries over the years. Energy companies. Exploration companies. Mining consultants. All asking about the same section of land. The southern acreage of Willow Creek Farm. Nobody in my family had ever responded. Not my grandfather. Not my mother. Not anyone. The rights simply remained untouched. Waiting. For decades. Mr. Dawson leaned back in his chair. Hannah, I think your mother knew exactly what she was leaving behind. I swallowed hard. How valuable are we talking? He hesitated. I honestly don't know. That answer somehow scared me more, because it meant the number could be enormous. 2 weeks later, I got my answer. A land valuation specialist arrived at the farm. Then another. Then another. Engineers. Surveyors. Geologists. 4 days they studied the property, tested records, reviewed historical reports, examined old geological surveys. Finally, one of them asked to meet with me privately. I sat across from him in the farmhouse kitchen. The same kitchen where my mother used to bake apple pies. The same kitchen where she taught me how to knead bread. The same kitchen where my entire future was about to change. The specialist opened a folder, then pushed it toward me. I stared at the estimate and nearly dropped it. The figure was unbelievable. Several $1 million. Not guaranteed. Not immediate. But potentially available through leasing agreements connected to the mineral rights. I couldn't speak. My grandfather had unknowingly preserved an asset worth a fortune. My mother had discovered it years ago. And instead of exploiting it, she protected it. For me. Tears filled my eyes. Even after death, she was still taking care of me. But the biggest shock came 3 days later. Attorney Rebecca called again. And this time, her voice sounded different. Almost stunned. Hannah. What happened? We received new information from the investigators. My stomach tightened. About Denise. Yes. I closed my eyes. What now? Rebecca took a deep breath. The investigation uncovered something unexpected. My heart started pounding. What? Your father. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. What about him? There was a long silence. Then Rebecca said the words that changed everything. Before he died, your father discovered what Denise was doing. I froze. The room disappeared around me. What? He knew about the loans. My pulse thundered. He knew. Rebecca's voice softened. Yes. I felt tears gathering. Because for months I had believed my father never knew. Never saw. Never understood. But he had. And according to newly uncovered documents, he had taken action. Quietly. Privately. Just before his death. Action that would expose Denise's lies. Action that would protect the farm. Action nobody discovered until now. Including Denise. And when the investigators finally revealed what your father had done, it would bring Denise's entire world crashing down. 4 days, I couldn't stop thinking about what Rebecca had told me. My father knew. The realization haunted me. After my mother's death, I had convinced myself that Dad simply failed to see what Denise was becoming. I thought he was blinded by loneliness. Blinded by grief. Blinded by love. But I was wrong. He knew. And somehow, just before he died, he had tried to make things right. A week later, Rebecca called me into her office. When I arrived, a thick folder sat on her desk. Beside it was a sealed envelope. My heart immediately started racing. What's that? Rebecca smiled softly. The investigators found it in your father's personal safe. I stared at the envelope. My father's handwriting covered the front. For Hannah. My throat tightened. I carefully opened it. Inside was a letter. The last letter my father would ever write to me. My hands shook as I began reading. My dear Hannah, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer here. There are things I should have said sooner. Things I should have done sooner. And for that, I'm sorry. After your mother died, I was lost. Lonelier than I've ever admitted. When Denise came into my life, I convinced myself I had found a second chance. For a while, I believed it. But eventually I started noticing things. The money. The lies. The loans. The secrecy. At first, I ignored it because I didn't want to believe I had made another mistake. Then I learned the truth. And when I did, I knew I had to protect you. Protect the farm. Protect everything your mother spent her life building. I only pray I wasn't too late. Tears blurred my vision. I had to stop reading several times. The pain felt fresh. Like losing him all over again. But then I reached the final paragraph. Your mother was the strongest person I've ever known. This farm was never about land. It was about family. Legacy. Love. And if you're standing up for it now, then you're more like her than you realize. No matter what happens, know this. I was proud of you. Always. Love. Dad. I broke down crying. Right there in Rebecca's office. Not because of the farm. Not because of the money. But because for years, I had carried anger toward my father. And now I finally understood. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. Big ones. But in the end, he tried to fix them. The investigation wrapped up several months later. The results were devastating for Denise. Authorities confirmed she had knowingly misrepresented ownership information while attempting to secure loans and complete the sale. Several lenders filed civil claims. Multiple financial agreements were voided. The legal consequences followed quickly. As for Jason, the failed businesses, the unpaid debts, the reckless spending, it all came to light. For years, Denise had been sacrificing everything to rescue him, including property that never belonged to her. In the end, neither of them walked away wealthy. But the farm survived. That was what mattered. Months later, I stood beneath the old oak tree. The same tree where my mother once sat drinking sweet tea. The same tree where she made me promise to protect the farm. The fields stretched across the horizon, golden and beautiful. Exactly as she remembered them. Exactly as she wanted them. The trust remained intact. The property remained protected. The mineral rights remained in the family. And for the first time in years, the future felt secure. That afternoon, the entire community gathered for the annual harvest celebration. Families filled the property. Children ran through the fields. Old workers laughed together. Music drifted through the air. Looking around, I realized something important. The farm had never truly belonged to one person. Not my grandfather. Not my mother. Not me. It belonged to generations. To memories. To promises. And promises matter. Especially the ones made to people we love. As the sun began setting, I walked to my mother's grave. I placed fresh flowers beside the headstone. Then I smiled. You were right, Mom. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. For a moment, it felt like she was there. Listening. Watching. Proud. The farm stayed in the family. Tears filled my eyes. But this time they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of peace. Because after everything, the lies, the betrayal, the legal battles, the fear, the farm was safe. My mother's legacy was safe. And the promise I made all those years ago had finally been kept. As I turned toward home, the sunset painted the fields gold. The farm looked beautiful, stronger than ever. And for the first time since losing my parents, I wasn't looking backward anymore. I was looking forward, toward a future built on truth, family, and love. The very things my mother had been protecting all along. The end. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a new emotional story. Your support means more than words can say, and it helps us continue bringing these untold stories to life.